Hello there.
I'll start. I know
Well,
you
yeah.
go.
Hey,
Okay, no, you're going to do it? Okay.
This is two
I'm pretty
professionals
excited.
doing a podcast. Welcome to Not For Radio, the Thursday edition. For those that aren't Sniper Elite, good to have you back with us.
Yeah.
My name's Duncan Hyde. That is Jay Reeve. And I can confirm today's episode is, I would say, if not the greatest guest we've ever had, as far as what we got out of this interview, it'd be top two.
Interesting top two. Who would the other one be in there, do you reckon?
Oh, I've got a soft spot for Pete
Pete
Bethune.
Yes.
The absolute mad dog.
Yeah.
He's coming back in a couple of weeks as well.
TJ Power is the person that we're talking about, and his book, The Dose Effect, is literally like a fucking massive boulder that's been thrown into a lake that I'm near. And the ripple effect of this, the number of people that I've passed this on to, the number of connections that have been made off the back of this, and the different ways that I think about myself and how I operate. Like, if you listen to this podcast, you know I'm a bit of a fucking ratbag, bit of a pig, got a bit going on, a bit of a shambles, bit of a fucking scrambled old egg upstairs. And it just helps you make sense of why you do things. So sometimes you go, what a fucking idiot. Why do I keep doing this? Like, we have got hundreds of thousands of years of genetic molding to get us to where we are. And in the last, say, 200, we've fucked it. In the last 20, we've done an even bigger number on it.
We are doing an absolute number on it. And as far as what's going to be covered off, it's basically the big four as far as chemicals in your brain and how they react with your body and how you can maybe boost certain chemicals, stop doing things that it's going to be abusing your serotonin levels. Like, there is so much. I said to Teagues just after we recorded it, I was like, we're going to chop that up into like 10 short videos because there's that much goodness in it.
And we need him back. He's based in the UK. He's a neuroscientist. The Dose Effect, talking through dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, which pump through your body. You're going to fucking love this. And if you care about anybody in your life, you'll want to send it on to them.
And he's got a book too.
Yeah, which is a fucking easy read, and I'm spuddy.
Which is great, because if you're like me, you'll be a Dory and you won't remember any of the podcast, but you just know it's good. Enjoy the podcast.
Our next guest is the lead neuroscientist at the Dose Lab, a renowned international speaker and co-founder of Neurify, a trailblazing organisation in the mental health sector. His work focuses on providing easy-to-adopt, scientifically backed teachings that empower people to take actions towards healthier lifestyles. Having studied psychology and neuroscience at the University of Exeter, he has captivated audiences worldwide. Working with major corporations and health services, he continues to reach millions through social media. He also has one of the coolest surnames in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, TJ Power.
Wow! Whoa!
Hot damn!
TJ, welcome to the show, mate. 100% the strongest name out of any guest we've had so far in 2025.
Congratulations.
That's a good start. Yeah, my parents gave me a good shot for this, giving me that surname. So let's see how it goes.
Now, if you were to listen to that introduction, you'd be like, oh, this is going to be a really nerdy individual and a person that's probably going to be sending out ideas that are way above what I could comprehend. But probably to just wind it back a little bit. Like, you were a ratbag and a miserable little bastard like the rest of us, weren't you?
100%, man. I struggled a lot at school my whole life as a kid. And then I discovered what I refer to as quick dopamine, like alcohol and cigarettes and partying, and spent like a decade completely hooked on all of that stuff. And then finally I came to understand these brain chemicals, and they provided a big shift for getting me out of that ratbag kind of life and into a slightly better one.
Have you noticed a paradigm shift in how you feel? Because I think I can speak on behalf of a lot of people when I go, I'm 42 years old. You'll be looking at me going, that bloke's in the mid-60s. I've been driving this beaten up rental for quite some time. And can I change the way that I operate? Can I change these neurochemical responses to how I operate? I can literally break it down for you as simple as this. I have a couple of drinks. Then I start to lean into some other bits and pieces, and then every single vice basically unravels at once. So if I don't have a couple of drinks, then I can almost keep the bobsled out of the tracks and off the sled course before I just send it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you can create change. There's a lifestyle where you also can have fun, but you also can have healthier days. There is a lot of neuroscience as to why when you get on that bobsled, you head down that path, like the dopamine way in which it works begins to seek for more and more of the quick dopamine when you start engaging in the booze and then the next things that you may want to engage in. But there are definitely certain actions you could be taking in order to be rebalancing your brain chemistry outside of those moments.
So when you started digging into this, at what point were you like, I'm going to go real deep? Like this really excites you. And you mentioned just being, doing the same thing that many Kiwis and people that listen to this podcast would have done and spent a fair whack of their 20s and some of their 30s, and maybe people still doing it in their 40s.
Maybe even into their 50s, possibly even into their 60s.
But partying hard, it's the work hard, play hard mentality. What was the bit that grabbed you that made you go, oh man, there is so much that people need to know about this field?
I think I was just finding it frustrating that so much of my life was being spent waiting for the next time that I was going to feel really, really good. And a lot of the mundane moments of life of like gym and walks and dinner and like all the like more normal stuff was feeling kind of shit. And I started having this realization when I discovered this dopamine brain chemical that I was living in this like pursuit of just really intense pleasure, but not enjoying the rest of it. And when I then started trying to make some changes to how my day began and what I did when I woke up in the morning, I started seeing a life whereby I could actually enjoy like 80% of my life rather than 10%. And that began to motivate change.
Wow.
And you do a great job of laying this out in the dose effect as well, because it does sound like a very complicated thing to get your head around. But the way that you lay it out in the book and the different sort of options that you probably offer up. So if you were to give like a real life example of curtailing, because I think at the same time we need to almost be realistic in what it is that we're doing. I think that if you were to, like a lot of people will be coming into this, they would have already blitzed straight through their New Year's resolution. Righty, I'm cutting the piss, partying and the darts, this, and then probably midday, January 1st, they're just thumping a ciggy, dusting a couple of tubes and calling a bloke in a lowered BMW with tinted windows. I think that we need to be realistic, because as soon as you break those New Year's resolutions, you just drop back into a cycle that's almost worse than before.
I think the most useful thing you can do is think about what your first source of dopamine is going to be when you wake up in the morning, because our brain instinctively wakes up craving dopamine. For our ancestors, for like hundreds of thousands of years, that motivated them to wake up and want to go hunting or rebuild shelter or restart a fire. Their brain was instinctively drawn towards some kind of effortful action that would build the dopamine chemical. And now the phone in particular is actually not just impacting our addiction to the phone, but it's priming us to want to be hooked on everything else throughout the day. And if we wake up and our brain immediately gets some dopamine out of social media, some might wake up and like immediately watch pornography, for example, you then prime yourself towards the path of addiction. Whereas if you could wake, and we call it taking action when you wake, you try and force yourself immediately to go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth, you splash cold water on your face, you go back and make your bed. You've primed your brain towards effortful action over the quick, easy dopamine, which is so much better than how your day begins to go.
So if you had to explain what that dopamine and how it works, why do we have dopamine in the first place, and what does it do in terms of our actions in a day-to-day?
Yeah, so it evolved in our brain to basically make the experience of doing hard things feel really good. So for hundreds of thousands of years, we had spent like 5 hours, for example, hunting out in a forest. That wouldn't have been like an easy activity, but we needed a brain chemical to give us the tenacity to keep doing it so that we would survive as a species. And any time in your life in which you're doing something really effortful that makes you feel good afterwards, you're building this dopamine molecule in your brain. Anytime you're doing something super easy and quick pleasure, you're overbuilding the chemical, you're producing way, way too much of it, and then you're exhausting the resource and then creating what we call low dopamine, which is where we feel apathetic and depressed, and we're kind of like, oh, fuck it, I just want more quick dopamine and so on.
So how long does it take for your body to get overloaded? For example, this would be fairly normal for a lot of people, I reckon. Alarm clock goes off early. They start looking at their phone. They jump on TikTok. They start scrolling, watching a shitload of videos. Go, fuck it, I can't be bothered going to the gym today. Sit there for another 40 minutes, and then that's how they start their day. Go and put a bloody Pop-Tart in the in the toaster. Like, have you cooked your dopamine by that point, or does it take more than that?
Unfortunately, yeah. As soon as you have open TikTok, you've begun to cook your dopamine, which I know it's annoying to hear that, but it's also nice to feel really good and be motivated in life. And that beginning of your day is so crucial. And just to give you some context as to how this works, we've got this area of our brain called the ventral tegmental area. And this is basically your dopamine factory. And you can imagine this little box in your brain, and it's generating what we call dopamine vesicles, which are little like dopamine bubbles sitting in your brain. So you've got dopamine factory with dopamine bubbles. You then have something called the nucleus accumbens, which is basically your reward center. And whenever you're doing something that's effort, say you're in the gym, for example, you're sending some of those dopamine bubbles to the reward center. Let's imagine throughout that workout, 5 of these bubbles will go across to that reward center, and gradually you'll feel quite good. At the end, an extra 2 or 3 will go because you've completed something, and you have like 8 bubbles sitting in your reward center. It's like, oh, nice, I feel good now, I've done something hard. When you open TikTok, when you first wake up, it will send about 50 of those bubbles towards the reward center. So in that moment, your brain will be like, fuck, this feels so good. I love TikTok. Look, all these sexy girls or entertaining stuff, whatever it might be on your TikTok feed. But then when you look at the dopamine factory, it's then got a hell of a lot less dopamine sitting in it. And your ability to then make yourself go to the gym or cook a healthy breakfast or go to work or have a nice conversation with someone, suddenly all of that reduces because we've used up this really important resource.
It's such an incredible example. Like that makes so much, like I'm not saying that I'm a thick person, but a person of minimal to low intelligence, that makes a lot of sense to me.
It just explains why so many people are walking around in almost like a zombie-like state. Like, I feel like, and this may be a sweeping generalization, but there seems to be, for the most part, way less people you bump into where you finish having the chat with that person and you go, fuck, they've got a spark for life. Like that hardly ever happens anymore.
And probably to add to the back of what Dunc's saying, like when you go past a bus stop, like I drop my kids off at a bus stop every morning, and there'd be 20 kids there with their heads craned forward, posture poked, cutting off, like air supply, mouth breathing while they're staring through a death scroll of social media. Do you reckon generationally, the next generation that are coming through, like if we think we're bad now, they are going to be fucked?
Oh man, we're really, really underestimating it. Like I spend my life in schools training these kids. Yesterday I trained like 600 or 700 like 11-year-olds, and that's like a age where they're really getting hooked on all this stuff for the first time. And when your dopamine factory is low in those dopamine bubbles, things like concentrating on a task is absolute hell. And if you look at the like state of kids right now in terms of being able to concentrate in school, work hard, do things they don't want to do that are uncomfortable and difficult, it's reducing rapidly. And whilst it's like, oh yeah, who cares? When these kids enter like 17, 18, 19 years old and try and get into the workforce, we're really underestimating how difficult it's going to be for them to actually be able to contribute to society.
Man, it's absolutely frightening. Like I feel, my kids are a bit younger. They're like, the oldest is 7, and I feel like this is becoming more in the forefront of people's conversations in and around raising kids now. Like, it fucking frightens me, even like at the age they are. But luckily for me, and to a certain extent, you, Jay, you're how old now?
10.
So there is some people going through where this information that you're spreading is now starting to come out, and people are starting to hear, just how bad all the, I guess, phones and social media is. But like, I feel grateful in that respect that my kids are a little bit younger.
It's just so important that kids learn that effort comes first before pleasure, because then their brain begins to be primed over time and conditioned that they have to earn these rewards of things like iPads and gaming and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if kids come home from school and then it's like bang, straight into the iPad, their brain's just getting conditioned that it's so easy to access pleasure. And over like a decade, that'll make their brain so much more likely to be addicted to booze when they start drinking and cigarettes and all that sort of stuff. Whereas if they can start learning, like, in order to get hold of my iPad for a bit of time, I have to make sure like my bedroom is organized, or I have to have done the school homework, or I would literally imagine like when I do have kids, I'm going to require them to like do 20 or 30 press ups or something to be able to get the iPad into their hand, so that they like start learning effort comes first, because that would be so good for their brain.
That's also yet again a great tangible example of people that do have kids now and go, okay, cool. How do we turn things around? Because we've started, and I think I produced Big Westy Lee in the same sort of setup. My kids, like, we're lucky in our jobs, we get whipped in left, right, and centre. I'm a fucking PlayStation ambassador. I don't even play PlayStation. But I get sent games. We've got the latest and greatest of everything. We've got the Oculus setups left, right, and centre. And as a result of that, my kids have access to that sort of stuff. And it's gotten to a point where
I'm not. My kids are great. I've got identical twin boys, so I'm running some fucking human development studies on here at the moment. This is great stuff. I feed one of them only vegetables, other one only meat. I'll get back to you the results as we come through anyway. But one of the things that we have noticed is just in terms of mood, and I think that almost like that famous study. You would know it, where they had the rats in the cage and they got them addicted to cocaine, and then they put them into a bigger playground with all the different bells and whistles and things for them to run around on, and they didn't go near it. We live in a city, and when we are out of the city and at my parents', which is like a coastal beach town, that doesn't even enter their mind. They spend the whole day in the water surfing or diving or gathering seafood or running around on the beach. Have we, as a race, conditioned ourselves for the most part to get everything centralized in these cities, high density living, and as a result of that, we've basically chopped our own legs off because we were so lazy and we weren't willing to travel in the first place?
Yeah, to an extent. Like, we have basically created dopamine land, and that's where we're all living now. And it doesn't mean, like, I also live in a town environment. Like, I'd love to live out in the forest. Haven't managed to figure that out yet. And it doesn't mean you are completely fucked, but it does mean that more effort is going to be required to make sure these chemicals are being rebalanced. And for your boys, for example, it is that idea of, are they doing some hard exercise? This idea that I mentioned before of discipline in your home, like how you're taught in the military or when you become a monk to be really organized with your bed and your bedroom and so on. That one skill is so good for what we call raising their baseline dopamine. So how much dopamine their brain is just naturally learning to produce. And if you could have good movement requirements and discipline requirements in order to attain the Oculus headset, then it's going to be a lot better.
So, funny you say that about making them exercise before doing something. The other night, my oldest boy couldn't sleep and he was asking to watch TV. And must have been, I don't know, 7:30 at night or something like that. And
okay.
I was like,
it's in New Zealand, just as an example, it's light to like 11 o'clock at night. The kid hasn't even got any melatonin. Yeah, it's really tough to get some melatonin just fired up in their whole body.
So I was like, mate, well, if you've still got heaps of energy, like it's past your bedtime now, it's like, why don't you do some press-ups? He's like, oh yeah, how many do you reckon I can do? I was like, I don't know, 40 or something. And he's like, bit of a unit. And then he knocked out 100 press-ups.
No,
I'm not even lying. Admittedly, the form's got a bit to go, but he's fucking going to be like RoboCop if I put that in front of a PlayStation.
Perfect.
The other question I was going to ask is, and people listening, some people have younger kids like I do, we haven't got iPad yet. We haven't got a PlayStation yet. They barely go on our phones. If they do, it's to look at photos. But is this the everything we've been talking about, the dopamine, is that exactly the same for TV? You know, using the TV as the reward, and is that smash the dopamine as hard?
Yeah, it's interesting because with that example I gave earlier of this dopamine factory with these bubbles moving to the reward center, TikTok or YouTube shorts, or like if a kid was really young, there's a TV show called Coco Melon, which is like a really stimulating kids TV show. If the show is rapidly changing in its content, like if it's lots of novelty, then it really stimulates dopamine. If you think of a movie that might be like a little bit slower pace, like if you wouldn't show this to your kid, but Gladiator 1, for example, I watched that the other night. When you sit and watch Gladiator 1, you'll notice like it's a little bit slower as the storyline builds. If the content is slow, it's actually all right for the dopamine. If it's rapid, it's not all right for the dopamine. So whenever you're picking your kids' TV shows or whatever they're going to watch, it's all about orienting towards a slower paced show that's going to require some kind of storyline that they're going to have to concentrate and follow.
Okay, cool.
So this is the dose effect, basically, is an acronym for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. So I guess if we were to move into the oxytocin space, and we talk...
just quickly, good ways to increase dopamine. We kind of touched on bad things, you know, like alcohol, drugs, sugary foods, another one, vaping, gambling.
I was going to say, this is because I like to work in the grey. So if I was, because I'm guessing that caffeine and coffee would feed heavily into this as well. If you were to make a fire, which then boiled the water to then make yourself a delicious cup of coffee, is that better than just jamming a cup under a coffee machine and hitting go?
100%, man. Making that fire would build so much healthy dopamine. And our brain learned over hundreds of thousands of years to earn dopamine. That is the whole point of it. It's supposed to do some of this effort, then receive the dopamine. And if you made a fire, then that would be getting your baseline dopamine to a nice healthy level. And then it would cope with the spike that the caffeine brings much better. Whereas if it's wake up in the morning, hit the TikTok, crash the dopamine, then go for the caffeine to get yourself out of bed, then it's these big curves that a lot of us follow.
Long black, 2 ciggies, bit of porn. Thanks, mate. Let's go.
Perfect. Off for the day.
just running well below baseline. That's what they call a truck driver's breakfast.
Let's just say 4 or 5 things that are good for increasing dopamine apart from the hard work.
Yeah, so taking action when you wake, so getting out of bed and doing something immediately. Cold water immersion is unreal. So if ever you could turn your shower cold at the end, it's extremely good. There's this thing called flow state, which is where our brain gets very deeply immersed in a task. And people might get that in their working life, when they're cleaning, when they're playing sport, when they're doing art, making music. But if you can find an activity in your life where you get deep into a state of focus, that's extremely good for the dopamine. And then underlying the whole thing is what we call my pursuit. And what you basically see is that dopamine is at its highest level when you're in the pursuit of a goal and working towards something. And a lot of us think that our happiest life is the other side of achieving the thing that we're really trying to attain, like the house or money or a car. But you actually see in dopamine research that your happiest life is actually just before you get the goal that you think is going to make you really happy. And being in the pursuit of a goal is really important, whether that's health or career or family, whatever it is.
We talk to a large number of Olympic athletes and talking to. We do okay in New Zealand for a tiny little country at the bottom of the planet. We do all right for ourselves. And one bloke in particular that we were talking to said that he was riding this wave the whole way back on the plane. They partied after these are gold medalists. Partied the whole time afterwards, jumped into the village, just everyone's going bananas. Congratulations, high fives, butt tap, touch on the rod, the works, you know. And then they get on the plane and they were welcomed off the plane by our Prime Minister at the time. And he reckons the second he took a step past the Prime Minister, it just fucking fell out the arse because he's like, and now what? He's like, you've never seen... this is literally like every bit of joy being drained out of your body instantly. And he's like, you would never be able to even explain it to a normal person. Like nothing comes close to how bad that felt. And he's like, I'm walking into the airport, like they had this big welcome as you walk through the gates. He couldn't even crack a smile. He was like, fuck, I'm borderline depressed.
It literally is the symptom of depression that comes. Like our brain is programmed to just always keep hunting. It was designed to never be satisfied because we didn't live in like abundance when we were hunter-gatherers. It just had to, you found some meat, but it didn't mean you were just like, cool, I've got meat for the rest of my life. You had to make sure the next day you were back up and out again. And in those situations, someone no longer has a pursuit. They've almost like peaked their journey of hunting effectively. And their brain, until they find the next thing to hunt for, is going to really struggle.
So many of them have announced as well just recently that they're going for the next Olympic Games.
I don't even reckon half of them will make it, but they just fucking need a goal.
Even if it just gives them a goal to chase for a period of time, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. Let's chat about the feel-good drug, Oxytocin. Now, how are the levels in modern-day humans of Oxytocin?
Effectively, our levels of oxytocin are now low because we're living constantly in the pursuit of dopamine. Like our life is so oriented towards either success or money or pleasure now, which is all dopamine. And as a result, oxytocin is reducing. Oxytocin is the chemical that creates the emotion of love. When you're connecting with your kids, your partner, whatever it might be, your friends, you experience this rise in oxytocin. And something as simple as sitting with your partner in bed whilst you both scroll your phones, that is our modern society living in the pursuit of dopamine instead of oxytocin by connecting with them.
Yeah. Do you reckon that, I mean, obviously it goes part and parcel, is that we've almost falsified it? We've got like a really shitty watered down version because we feel that we're connected to all of these people through these social media apps, yet we're more disconnected than ever before. Like
I don't think people have ever been more isolated in the history of mankind.
But we talked about, myself and Dunc were talking about it saying, like, we live in the biggest city in New Zealand and I've never fucking felt more alone. Like it's like we've got our insular team here. We've made moves to change that, and we've got a great group of lads, varied ages, and a couple of chicks that meet up every morning. We jump in the ocean, big hugs, hold the hug extra long, extra big squeezes, saunas, a bunch of the stuff that goes with it, which actually has made a massive difference. Small amount of movement as well. We could definitely do with a bit more of that. You can probably tell by looking at us. We're pretty fucking pork chopoluses. But we've almost, it was one of those things that was never spoken about. And we recently did a campaign randomly with the New Zealand Beer Company. It was like, the campaign was hold a hug for 6 seconds. And that was as simple as you could possibly get. But man, it's fucking awkward. People just don't hug anymore. And if you are particularly, we do a lot of stuff with Movember as well. And what we've found over the years of doing Movember is that particularly men, our friend group is at its peak when we're about 18, end of high school here in New Zealand. And then it starts to drop off. And then you just end up being mates with your missus's mates' husbands. You probably fuck all in common. You're not going to go and hug that random bloke, are you? And so things start to really spiral out, and you wonder why the fellas start to lose the plot. About 45, go and get hair plugs, buy a red MX-5 and start banging the receptionist. It's because you're not feeling connected.
100%, mate. And you're right in the sense that like this social media phone world is like moderately satisfying our desire for something like oxytocin. Like because we spend the evening looking at other people on a phone, our brain is being somewhat lulled into thinking that it's seeing humans. But when you look into oxytocin research, when you're just watching content or texting people, none of this chemical releases at all in those sort of environments. Wow. And it's just really important that we start considering like, if the phones disappeared, obviously in the evenings and weekends, we'd all be super motivated to socialize. We wouldn't all just sit looking at a wall all weekend. So it's just important to consider like exactly what you're doing. Going and hugging your friends is a good idea. Even if it's like awkward to hug a friend, even just like high-fiving your friends and doing some kind of activity, particularly in male groups, that gets you to have some kind of group objective. Like if you did something as ridiculous as stand in a forest and try and build a fort together. As much as that sounds like, wow, yeah, I kind of remember doing that when I was 7 years old. You would fucking love it and you'd get super into it and you'd be high-fiving and you'd be celebrating it because our brain did that for 300,000 years and now it just sits wanking at home smoking cigarettes and it doesn't only want that.
Alternatively, though, imagine going for a bushwalk with your kids and stumbling upon 3 40-year-old blokes building a hut in the middle of the forest. You'd be like, these guys are going to be diddling kids for sure.
Maybe like
radio boys, speed up.
If the kids are involved, it would look less weird.
Good point. Yeah, we need to build some parameters around this. Build a wanking hut in the forest.
That's going to be my reputation in New Zealand. TJ Power recommended building a wanking hut. Great.
That's the clip we're using as a promo for this. Once again, to really prey on people's dopamine.
Oh shit!
So I guess once again, what are the?
How do we fix it?
Yeah, how do we?
Apart from building a wanking hut.
That is how we don't fix it. That's how we stay in the problem. How do we fix it? The first thing is anytime you do something for any other human being in your life, you build an absolute ton of this chemical. So in our day-to-day lives, it can be pretty easy to be focused on how we're going to make our own brain feel really good with our work or pleasure or whatever it might be. Any time in which you're doing something that just serves another human being, it's going up. So whether that's literally as simple as like you're getting a coffee from a barista and you say to her, oh, how's your day going? And you say something like nice in that moment to engage another human being, both of your oxytocin is going up. Helping your wife out, doing something nice for your kids, oxytocin is increasing. So the step one in oxytocin is just learning to contribute more to other people.
And what about someone like famous in your neck of the woods, Troy Hawk, who is part of, have you seen him in the Greeters Guild? He's like a comedian, but he stands there in like a velvet smoking jacket and basically just looks for something positive in a person, like somebody walking past and they're like, I love the way you're walking. That's a strong and powerful walk, so you have a great day. Like it's funny, but we started doing it kind of around the office and fuck, it makes a difference to people's lives. And we've even had...
it was actually quite good until Jay said my head looked like a dropped lollipop, and I was like, "This game isn't fun anymore."
I need to obviously, bring the bumper rails in on this bowling alley that we're working with. But also, there was a guy that came up to us at a festival, came up to me at a festival just before Christmas, and he's kind of a little bit out of sorts. And I was like, "Mate, do you need a hug?"
And I was like, when was the last time you had a hug? And he goes, I couldn't tell you the last time I'd been hugged.
Whoa.
Like, there's a lot of people. Like, he was probably in his 50s, and he picked us out as the other old weirdos at a festival. So just sort, safety in numbers. But there are so many people out there that, A, have nothing nice said to them, or they're walking around with headphones on so they're not making themselves available to it. Like, I punish people every single morning with a million good mornings and a smile and a high five and, fuck, you're looking sharp there, Big Herb. Like, I try and pour out as much as I can. And people are like, that's a little bit over the top. But in all honesty, it's a selfish pursuit because I'm almost doing it for myself to make sure that I know that I'm contributing enough and getting it out there.
That is the interesting thing about oxytocin is like any kind of good deed you do will actually make yourself feel great as well. And that's just like useful evolutionary programming in our brain because we had to be programmed not to be selfish. If you were a hunter-gatherer that went out and caught the animal and sat out there and ate it on your own and didn't give it to the group, your group wouldn't survive. And with those examples you shared there, one, being complementary is so good for this chemical. Oxytocin is the only chemical where you can actually boost it in someone else. Like, I can't boost your dopamine unless I like handed you a line of cocaine. I can't boost your dopamine. Whereas if I said something complimentary to you, I'd be increasing your oxytocin and mine. And on the hug thing, I just want to help you understand like why this is not just like some like light thing. When you're in your first like 12 months of life, when you're living in like a cot and stuff like that, you have lots of moments where you feel fearful and scared and worried. And the way in which your mom or your dad or your caregiver settle you is by coming over and holding you. And your body starts experiencing this relationship between cortisol, which is this stress hormone, and like an anxious feeling in your body, and then learning that physical touch is what settles that feeling of fear, that feeling that you might be alone. And a baby is so programmed because it's completely incapable of surviving on its own. So if it feels alone, to scream and get anxious and then have physical touch be the thing that makes it feel safe again. And although now you don't sit in your home like screaming and feeling anxious like a baby, inside your body, when it hasn't had physical touch for a while, it feels like it isn't having a good connection with the tribe, and therefore survival is at risk. And more physical touch creates this safety. So many of us feel so anxious and insecure now, and the touch is what actually calms our system and makes us feel like we belong to a group.
I wonder if other people that aren't getting that, you could do that under the guise of going to get, like, I don't know, just like a regular sports massage or something like that. Would that give the same 100%. Effect?
Definitely. A sports massage would be like really smart idea. And if you weren't having much physical touch, you went for one of those like once a month, every couple of weeks, that'd be perfect.
Great workaround. Great workaround.
A stat that I would just want to read out. I'm not sure how much time we've got. I know I've taken up heaps in it already, so I appreciate it. Okay, sweet. One of the stats around serotonin, which I thought was insane, 90% of your serotonin is created in your gut.
Yeah, which is crazy. And this is a chemical that the whole of society is now so low in because our guts are just like not in a very good shape right now, because obviously for all of time, all we could eat was like meat and fruit and nuts and fish and these kind of natural products that the world had to offer. When they enter our gut, our brain breaks all those amino acids down and then uses it to literally build serotonin in your stomach. And then that information is sent to your brain. And then now, obviously, we've got all this ultra processed food, which is really stimulating for our dopamine, but it enters the gut and our gut's like, what the hell? I can't build serotonin out of that. And then we get these big mood crashes. We feel much more exhausted and anxious and so on because of it.
Okay, in terms of, just wary of the fact that we're soaking up, the better part of your day here.
You're good. I'm going to go to the gym after this, so you're good.
Okay, so what are some of the foods or some of the ways that you can create it? Because I just, to make like a personal example, had like a course of antibiotics, and that was November, and fuck, I'm still knocked out of kilter. Like I just can't seem to get back. Like I'm a positive person, but I just kind of know that I've just thrown a fucking nuclear bomb through my body and there's nothing else in there at the moment. How do we build it back up? How do you get a healthy gut microbiome, and how do you feed it so that you can create that serotonin out of those little amino building blocks?
Yeah, so the staples are effectively making sure you have good quality meat go into your gut. So that could be like if you could ever source good quality grass-fed beef, for example. Lots of you guys in New Zealand would have better access to good meat. Then if you could make sure you eat fruit, like a lot of us don't eat enough fruit. Fruit is one of the best things for serotonin. It's actually better than vegetables from a serotonin point of view. Vegetables are obviously still great for you, but fruit is really, really essential. And then in a situation like that, where you've actually had some kind of nuclear bomb go in the gut via the antibiotic, I'd really recommend, do you guys have something like kefir, for example, which is like a fermented yogurt? Do you have that product in your supermarkets? Yeah, so that's full of a load of bacteria that are called lactobacillus. And lactobacillus is extremely good as a building block for serotonin. And they've actually been doing really cool studies where they compare people that have these fermented products via what we call lactobacillus, and they compare them to people taking SSRIs, which are the serotonin-based medications for mental health. And you actually see really comparable results for people when they have these fermented products, which is super interesting because the gut starts building naturally more serotonin. And that's not to say you suddenly ditch your medication and then you take that, but alongside it or as something to support you, they're a really cool thing to do.
So into that, would that be like the kimchis of the world and the sauerkrauts and that sort of, mate. So look for a person wearing
sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha drinks. And you'll notice that if you look at the ingredients list on these things, and in general with nutrition, like it's so important to start looking at the ingredients list because so many things are full of all these emulsifiers and seed oils and crap that really screws our gut. And if you look on these fermented products, you'll see the word lactobacillus. And that means it's going to be something that's going to build this good gut bacteria for your serotonin.
So if you're looking for that in New Zealand, find somebody that's wearing Thai fisherman pants and smells like sandalwood, and they will lead you straight to one of these places.
Follow them down the aisle.
Oh, shit. There's some crazy stat that the entire intestinal tract, if you like flatten it all out, it covers a tennis court. So like what a place to start as far as making your mind healthier through your gut.
Yeah, for sure. And we got this crazy system called our vagus nerve, and it's this nerve that connects into the back of your head, and then it goes down your spine, and then it flows all the way down into your gut. And it's literally sitting there reading the state of that intestinal tract the whole time. And if the intestinal tract is thriving, it's got loads of nutrients in, your vagus nerve is literally vibrating and sending that information to the back of your head and then lifting your mood in your brain. And a lot of the time when it's reading the gut, it's like, fucking hell, what's going on in here? And then it's sending the opposite message to your brain.
Just imagining the face that my vagus nerve would make if it was trying to figure out what's going on in my body at the moment. Jesus, getting knocked from pillar to post. Is there something, once again, looking in the grey, is there a type of alcohol or say, for example, something that you could enjoy to party with that is better than others when it comes to that doesn't go through and turn your gut into a nuclear wasteland? Is there kind of a plant medicine, or is there a kombucha mixed with tequila or agave, which is better for you than most other sort of, the stuff that messes us up, basically, getting on the cook?
Yeah, I would say quality of booze is really significant. Like if you were looking like a bottle of red wine, not all red wine will screw you up in the same way. And if you could get a higher quality red wine, your gut's ability to detoxify the challenging component of the wine is going to be easier than when it's super cheap. And like, for example, when you're a kid and you try and get access to some booze and you get some really cheap vodka, it makes you feel really, really shit because it's such cheap quality. So then it's very hard for your gut to manage. So quality is really significant to consider. You can then get this thing called charcoal. It's like a little pill of charcoal that actually dries the alcohol in your body. That can be a smart way to try and reduce how long it sits in your body for. And I would always just be thinking with alcohol, the most important thing you'll be doing is trying to drink it earlier in the evening than super late at night. That doesn't mean start drinking at midday. Obviously, that's going to ruin your life. So if you can just like try and not drink a lot of drinks like post 11 p.m. If you are getting drunk, it's going to be easier for your gut to process it.
Geez, you're a realist, eh? There's like, if you,
and that's
people do get drunk all the time. There's no point sugarcoating or pretending everyone's perfect. I like it. It's super relatable.
And that's what I mean by the book that you've written and laid out as just a real class act. So congratulations. And we've got to get into this. The last piece as well about endorphins and what causes low endorphin rate within the human being.
The biggest thing is the sedentary lifestyle, the fact we're seated now. And I always keep referring back to these hunter-gatherer tribes. But there's a tribe, for example, called the Hadza in Central Africa. And this guy went and visited them. And the Hadza were averaging 35,000 steps a day on their normal day-to-day life. And if you think about even doing 10,000 steps, like with your Apple Watch or whatever, it's quite a lot, 10,000 steps. And our body naturally would actually want to do about 35,000 steps a day. And you think now, like, it's easy to do a day where it says like 3,000 steps. And our body for endorphins really wants physical activity. And it's really interesting because any time that the endorphins increase, it de-stresses us. It pulls stress out of our brain. It evolved basically so that whenever we were faced with a situation that was really stressful, like we were starving to death or we were in physical danger, endorphins would activate when we were running or fighting in order to take stress out of our mind to help us survive that situation. And if we are really stressed in the modern world, we really need to think about this endorphins chemical.
Wow. So that's basically a flushing agent for the shit in your body.
It is,
gets
and
the
it's
stress
like,
out.
if your kid, for example, to go back to that world, if they're sitting on an iPad for ages and they're just like in this dopamine land, hunting effectively in dopamine, and then you take the iPad away, you'll notice they get into this real like state of rage and frustration. But their brain actually thinks that they're on a hunt for food when they're in the iPad. And then if you suddenly took them away from the hunt, they would get really angry because they're so programmed to be in the pursuit of food. But it's so confusing for their body because they're sitting in dopamine land, but they're stationary and their body isn't having this endorphin release to keep them calm the whole time as they're in the pursuit of that hunt. And it's so important if your kid is one of those kids that rages hard to be significantly increasing their endorphin activation through hard physical movement to literally physically get the stress out of their system so that they can cope with the dopamine land they're living in.
I just bought my boys a boxing bag and some boxing gloves, just before Christmas.
Yeah.
He's
He's about 2 weeks away from getting a fucking hiding from 3 kids under the age of 7.
And last point I want to touch on, and dovetails quite nicely into the radio show we do. Music actually plays a big part when it comes to endorphins, right?
It does. Anytime that you're singing or dancing to music, you get this physical activation in your body. And you'll notice, like, if you're sitting in the car and you're listening to music, if you were kind of like humming along to it, you'll get a bit of a positive feeling. But if you sung to it like you're a professional on stage, even if you're shit at singing, it doesn't make any difference. If you really sing to it, you'll notice you get like a euphoric, calming feeling come over your system. And that's because these endorphins are activating through that physical action. And our ancestors, like if you look at like Kiwi ancestors, for example, they had all these like music type ceremonies and tribal rituals that included sound from the body. And it's really important that we sing and we dance and listen to the music.
So there's something I've mentioned on our podcast a couple of times, and this will be like, and I would just love to know if there's any science in behind it. But for days that I'm feeling a little bit flat, or I might be like heading into work, I'm driving over the fucking Auckland Harbour Bridge, and we do a podcast before we do a radio show, and sometimes I'm like, there's a mountain of work to get through, although when I always start, it's going to be enjoyable. But sometimes I'll literally steer straight ahead or look up at the mirror and say a couple of positive things, or be like, today's going to be a fucking great day. And I'll repeat it a few times in a row and smile while I'm saying it. And the first couple of times you feel fucking crazy. You get to about 5 and you're like, you know what? Today's me. Let's go out there and get it. And it legit works for me. Is there any science in behind that?
Definitely, mate, because you're clarifying to your brain that there's some kind of pursuit for the day. You're making it clear that some kind of fun, good objective is coming. So it's building that dopamine in the dopamine factory when you're telling your brain, like, today's going to be a great day, and your brain's starting to see some kind of future-oriented potential. So smart move. I would do it as often as you can.
All right, good. Because I sometimes forget about it. Then I do it. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. It's weird as shit the first few times you do it. But when you feel better after it, you're like, yeah, well, that was free and easy. And I was driving a car, so I had time.
Yeah, but are there any of those other little free sort of affirmations that, I guess something that has no cost involved in it, something like those affirmations that you can do on a regular basis, on a daily basis, or is there a reflective practice? We talked about the journaling and
the 30 days of gratitude.
Yeah, 30 days of gratitude to try and rewire your brain. Have you found anything in your studies and in your life that works incredibly well? Or maybe what is it that you do for yourself?
Yeah, gratitude is phenomenal. I think people feel quite aware of the gratitude thing. I would say the additional one to gratitude is what we call achievements, which is in your head on the way home from work, consciously saying to yourself what you think you did that was actually a good thing to have done that day. And it's really interesting this because you increase your oxytocin in your brain when you celebrate an achievement about something that has happened that day, basically meaning you actually build a feeling of love for yourself in your brain. And a lot of us, as sad as it is, don't really love ourselves. We're kind of assholes to ourselves in our own thoughts. And if you go through a process in your head of each day thinking, okay, what went well today? And it was like something cool happened with a podcast, or something cool with your health or work, or even just a good conversation. Maybe you complimented someone, you stayed off your phone for a bit. Anything that was an achievement, you celebrate it. And the great thing is, not only does it increase oxytocin in the moment, but it starts actually training and conditioning your brain to do more of these healthy actions that you're wanting to send your life in that direction of. Like, just like if you were training two toddlers as they were growing up, if one set of parents was constantly criticizing their kid, the other one was celebrating the achievements it was making, one of them is going to grow up with much more self-belief because it believes it's capable of achieving things. And we have to almost treat our brain like a toddler and celebrate more of our progress more often.
It's all so interesting.
Yeah,
I can see why you got hooked on it.
Yeah, TJ,
it's better than a methamphetamine problem.
Yeah, I mean, my life looks a little better now. It was good fun back then.
TJ, mate, you're a spectacular human being, and we really, 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 really treasure the time we got to chat with you today. It's been mega. I love this shit, but Dunc loves this shit, and particularly everybody that's a part of this podcast and our radio show in particular really likes to figure out ways that we can be better. There's a lot of people that just point you to some form of a pharmaceutical relief system, or you've got to have this, that, and the other thing. But this is a much more tangible, and particularly the way that the Dose Effect is written. Like, it's just, like you said, a bulletproof baby steps way of actually sort of regathering a bit of control over something that a lot of us feel is completely out of control. So thank you very, very much. And if you ever make it over to this part of the world, we'd love to have you in for a catch up and show you around what we think is the most fucking beautiful part of the world.
I'd love that. My girlfriend's actually in Aussie, so we will be coming over to New Zealand at some point. And guys, I'm super grateful for you having me on your show. Those questions were so fun.
Oh, mate, that was epic. We really enjoyed it. And you can cheers out there in the producer's suite as well.
Yeah, very awesome. Right, we're going to shoot off and have a ciggy and a wank, so we'll catch up later.
I'll see you later.
Oh, fuck, that was fantastic, bro. It really was. Shit, that's good.
Thanks very much, man. We appreciate you. Have an awesome rest of your week, awesome rest of your year, and by all means, we mean it when we say please hit us up if you come anywhere near New Zealand. It'd be great to meet you in person.
I definitely will, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Cheers, brother. Go well.
Have a good one, fellas.
Instantly, the question that is racing through your mind, how do I get my hands on one of those books? Well, we've got the link in the show notes below, but we also have a bunch of these to give away, and we can ship these internationally.
We had 10, now we've got 9, AJ.
I'll put my own back into the fold once I've finished it. I'm currently doing a page a week, so should be able to get it done by the time about 75.
9 brand new ones, 1 that has been fingered.
Yeah, and they are very interactive books. Great books. There's also a whole bunch of podcasts that he does. We'll put all the links to those. But if you want to get your hands on one of these books, I think simply slide into our DMs with your name, your address, and which country you live in, possibly a contact phone number just in case the courier fucks things up, with the keyword DOSE, DOSE, if you hadn't already realised, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins.
And for those that haven't been on the potty for a while, we're now on YouTube.
Yeah.
Full episodes going up on YouTube, as all this one. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed today's episode.
I've had a person message me and they had never seen us. They'd heard the podcast for years.
Do you know what I reckon getting into our podcast is like? You know when you're learning to do skipping at school on the long rope and you're like, whoa, and you don't quite know. It's very hard to choose where to jump in. And sometimes you're better off just fucking running into the skipping rope.
Just get smacked in the face a couple of times and you'll fucking learn. But this person messaged me, and they're from the States, and they'd been passed on the podcast, but they just drive, so they've never seen, they're not on social media. I finally got on Instagram to get in touch, and they're like, holy fuck, you guys look nothing like I thought you'd look. Like, completely.
Can you go back to him and get him to give us the description of us that was in his head?
Yeah, well, because I said to him, what did you think we were going to look like? He was like, I don't know, but fucking not that.
Well, just search Not For Radio if you haven't seen our faces. You can go and check us out and be massively disappointed, like our wives are.
Disappointed. This is fucking catfishing, but the audio version.
Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll catch you tomorrow for another Not For Radio podcast.
Cheers.